Hi, this is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. Let's talk about the greatest lie, biggest myth in weight loss, and that is calories in equals calories out. Because once big food, big pharma, your doctor, the whole healthcare system, the government, everybody else, once they got you to buy into this idea, they could convince you that, you know what, if you're fat, it's your fault. You know why you're fat? Because you eat too much and you don't move enough. And once then they can safely ignore everything else when it comes to nutrition. Because if it all boils down to calories in, calories out, they can sell you glop, and if you're fat, it's your fault. Well, let's test this out. Is it true? Is it true that calories in equals calories out? And frankly, I think you can find, when you look into the physics and try to understand it, you realize this model falls apart pretty darn quickly. So let's break it down. Let's test out this myth. And the first part of the myth is all based on the misunderstanding of the first rule of thermodynamics. That rule is this: matter cannot be created nor destroyed. Same thing with energy. That's a quick summary of it. And that's true in physics. But it's not true when it comes to human physiology, because you're not a closed system. There's certain foods, if it was true, then if you ate 1,000 calories of wood chips, you would gain weight, right? Because you're eating all these wood chips. Well, the problem is your body can't absorb wood chips. So therefore, you're not going to gain any weight. When you start to think of it that way, there's a lot of things that you could eat that have lots of calories potentially. Hunk of coal could have a lot of calories in it when you put it in a bomb calorimeter, but you can't absorb any of it. So therefore, it has zero effect on your body. So just taking in a calorie doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have any effect on you. So there's a lot of different processes that go on, hormones reacting to it, insulin levels, blood sugars created. And when you start looking at all that, you realize, look, not every calorie counts the same. But it's complicated to describe that. So they go with the calories in, calories out model, and then they can say that all calories are created equal. And that's frankly not true. And who benefits from that? Well, Big Soda does, for dang sure. Because what they can do is say, look, a calorie that comes from our fizzy soft drink is equal to a calorie that comes from broccoli. And that's not true. That is completely not true, because they're absorbed in different places. See, part of this physiology system that we have is we've got a GI system which allows for absorption of different foods in different places. Some energy, like sugars that are coming in a liquid form, are going to be absorbed through the stomach wall and get into your bloodstream very fast. Ultra-processed food are often absorbed in the upper part of the GI before it gets to the microbiome. And that's going to cause fatty liver and a lot of fat deposits around your organs. Meats and stuff like that, when they get down into your lower gut, they're part of now become digested by the microbiome. And those create all sorts of different protective chemicals, helps with your immune system, that does a lot of different things. So, and then there's some waste products that come from it. So in that, from that perspective, you start to realize that, wait a second, just because I eat a calorie doesn't mean it's going to be absorbed that way, and it's not going to go in my waistline, and it's going to have a different effect. So all calories are not created equal. Some are very different depending on the level of processing and what type of food it is. Let's talk about this magical concept that we lovingly refer to as a calorie. And this is reason number 2 why it's the greatest lie, biggest myth in terms of weight loss. See, a calorie is a measure of energy. And how much mass, how much weight does energy have? 0. It's a photon, basically. If you remember your physics, or basic chemistry from high school. Those have zero mass. They're not creating weight. You're not weighing more because you have calories in you, which is a measure of energy expenditure. It has really, frankly, nothing to do with your weight. So when you really look at it, it's the amount of mass you're taking in and how it's absorbed and how it's being utilized by the hormones in your whole digestive system. So the calorie itself is an interesting construct, but it really doesn't have anything to do with you. Back when they created the bomb calorimeter, it was a breakthrough in the study of nutrition, and they were trying to figure out, okay, what type of foods have the most energy per gram? Well, fat has the most energy per gram, protein next, and carbohydrates third. And the problem was when you take that idea and you turn that into, okay, then the body's going to utilize it the same, and all calories are going to be utilized the same, that's where the model breaks down. So you're taking a construct of energy and trying to apply it to your body mass or your weight or your waistline. And you start to realize, wait a second, this doesn't really make any sense from that perspective. And speaking of energy, let's talk about, these people that want you to move more in order to lose weight. And boy, I sometimes think that the exercise equipment industry is in collusion with big food, because they often put those calorie counters on treadmills and stuff like that to give you the illusion that somehow you've burned enough calories during your treadmill session to afford to be able to eat a donut or drink an extra fizzy soda with sugar in it. And they are horribly inaccurate. I mean, there's no real government standard that says this is going to accurately predict how much energy you've actually utilized in your exercise session. They're kind of a rough guesstimate, but it has nothing to do with your weight, your metabolic system, how you utilize energy, what you've got in the tank, etc. It doesn't really tell you much of anything except for a relative measure of how much work output you've done. Doesn't tell you much, and it certainly doesn't tell you that you can have a donut. So don't follow that nonsense. But while we're at it, let's talk about the one thing the government does directly affect, and they're part of this collusion too. And that's the calorie counts they put on packaging. And when you realize that that can be off by as much as 25%, up or down, you're going to realize that, wait a second, if I am trying to maintain my weight by accurately measuring how many calories I eat every day, I can be off by at least 25%. Either way. I could be eating 25% more calories or 25% fewer calories than I think I need to maintain my ideal weight. If you think about it, boy, if you want to avoid gaining 10 pounds in the next decade, then you've got to avoid on a daily basis eating the equivalent of an extra Tic Tac. Because just a few calories each day, when you add it up over the course of a decade, it's going to equal 10 pounds. And when your food packaging's off by over 10 or 25%, you got a problem. It isn't going to work. The math just isn't going to work. If you buy into this idea that calories in, calories out is the ultimate model for making all this stuff work. But frankly, the bigger problem is this. Number 3, it doesn't work because different foods are absorbed differently. I mean, ultra-processed food is absorbed in the upper GI, not in the lower gut. Carbohydrates are all broken down into basically glucose and sugars, and that's going to increase your level of insulin, which can be it's a very important hormone in the body, but it has this very incredible ability to be able to store fat. So if you're spiking your insulin, your body is going to be storing fat much more readily than if you're eating a low carb diet. One of the reasons why so many people have gone carnivore is because it mixes the right proportions of protein and fat to make fat creation very difficult because it keeps your insulin levels so low. And if you don't think hormones make a difference, well, think about puberty. See, when when boys start to become men, it changes their shoulders and they put on more muscle and they put on fat in certain places. Women, the hormonal response is so powerful, they start putting fat in very special places that make them much more attractive and show fertility. I mean, it's a very powerful effect. That's the effect of hormones. The hormones have much more effect and ability to control our bodies than we often give them credit for. And you can control the hormone levels in your body by the food that you eat. It has nothing to do with the calories. It has everything to do with the type of food that you're putting in and how it's absorbed and how it's been processed. And this is all critical stuff that is completely ignored with the calories in, calories out model. And then finally, number 4 is, look, when you really boil it down to it, you are just a transport mechanism for about 20 pounds of bacteria called the microbiome. And this stuff controls a lot of who you are. It controls your immune responses. It controls, a lot of times, your mood. I mean, if you want to be lifted from depression by improving your gut microbiome, then sends signals up to your brain and crosses the blood-brain barrier and can actually make a huge change. And I'll do a video at some point on the absolute importance of the gut microbiome in terms of your mental health. But suffice it to say, for the course of this one, they're ignoring the gut microbiome whenever they discuss calories in, calories out. See, it's not a question of how many calories you're ingesting. It's always more of a question of what calories you're ingesting and how they're being utilized by the body. Now, this all being said, I can't make a discussion about this without saying, look, now while calories are an inaccurate measure and kind of a construct, they do make a difference. I mean, it is possible, arguably, to gain weight by overeating too much meat and fat, though it is extremely difficult. I mean, you have to override your body's satiety signals in order to make it happen. And the best study I've ever seen on that was an overfeeding experiment that they did on prisoners back in the 1960s. And this is, I think, an absolutely phenomenal experiment when you really think about it. What they tried to do was to see if they could get prisoners to gain weight by feeding them different things. And they had no problem getting prisoners to gain weight on carbohydrates. And they could affect a little bit more by increasing the amount of fat. But look, at a certain point, you give people enough fat and they get nauseous. And they had a very difficult time trying to get people to eat plain meat and increase their amount of protein, because there's a satiety point. Protein is just inherently satiating. I can overeat cake and ice cream with no problem. Give me a big bag of cookies or Doritos and I'll just keep on munching mindlessly. But you put a steak in front of me, and there just seems to be a natural limit to how much of that I can eat at one time. That's kind of why they serve dessert last. If they did that first, we'd fill up on dessert and never get around to eating the steak. So, it's much more complicated than the screwy system that they're giving us, that everything is always your fault, that it's all calories in, calories out. It doesn't work. The physics doesn't make sense. It ignores biological reality. The government's numbering system doesn't make any sense. And frankly, it ignores hormones and how the type of food that you're eating affects you and how you affect the food. It's all part of a single system. That is why I'm so big on carnivore and low-carb eating. If you're overweight, it is a great lifestyle. It is a great way of eating that actually improves your health by improving your metabolic health. And that's a concept that we will discuss again over and over and over again, because it's so darn important and just not discussed enough in this horribly ridiculous system that we've got that we call the healthcare system that is just not worried about your health at all. They're worried about their own systems. Food manufacturers are just worried about selling their stuff. And they really don't, they have a complete callous disregard for your health. The medical system, they've got their own worries. They're trying to take care of acute injuries, which are things that they can fix. But they're not worried about your health. If they were, they would be giving you 20-minute lectures about metabolic health, and they would be explaining to you that calories in, calories out don't really matter as much as the hormonal response to your food. So when you start adding it up, you realize, wait a second. At the end of the day, I've got to figure this out for myself, because none of these big institutions are going to tell me how to get healthy. And when you start to realize that, you're on the right road, right path, my friend, because that is the realization that I came to. All of them work with a complete callous disregard for your health. They may take care of your acute medical problem, but they're not going to make you a healthy human being. You've got to figure that out for yourself. And that's what this channel is about. And if you like this message and you want to be working at trying to improve your health, I will try to give you the best information I can in my decade-long journey to getting in better health. I mean, I started off at 50 with being basically a pre-type 2 diabetic, inflamed, miserable health, and weighing over 300 pounds. And slowly but surely, as the more knowledge I've got, the more healthy I've become. And I am enjoying going into my 60s, probably in the best shape I've been in my life. That's what this channel is about. We try to put out a new video every single workday. I will talk to you soon.